Hello, everyone. This is Brian Morris from Binary Stream, and I'm here today to talk to you, the customers of the TM Group, about our multi-entity management product for Business Central. With me is my colleague Don Ramsey. Don's the solutions consultant, so he'll be doing the bulk of the technical demo today, and I'll be talking a little bit about the product at a high level and what you can expect out of it. Today's session should take probably about 45 minutes. There may be some questions at the end, and it will be recorded for your viewing convenience. So for an agenda today, we're going to go over what it is that you'll be seeing about MEM, just kind of a high-level overview of the benefits of the product and the components that it has, and then Don's going to go into the demo itself, followed by the Q&A. For those of you that don't know who Binary Stream is, we are a Canadian ISV, or independent software vendor. We've been working exclusively with the Microsoft product set for 20 years now, and much like the TM Group, our background is with the GP, or Great Plains product set, but we've been growing as Microsoft has, and now we've ported over this product, multi-entity management, to Business Central. So it's the latest addition to our offering. So in some senses, it's a new product, but in others, it's our very old flagship product that's been around for nearly 2 decades. Here's a quick overview of our solutions portfolio. So as you can see on the left-hand, or the second to left column with Dynamics GP, all of our products, multi-entity management, property management, healthcare materials management, and the subscription billing suite, they're all available for GP. They're all going to be available very shortly for Business Central. And for the finance and operations product, we have subscription billing available now. HMM will be made available. And property management, it actually says in development there. As of today, as of April 2020, it's now in beta. So probably by May, that should be available for general purchase in the Finance and Operations Suite. But for today, we're going to be talking about multi-entity management. I'm just going to refer to it as MEM, M-E-M for short. As I mentioned, it's our flagship product, and what sets it apart is it can really be applicable for any industry or any size company. The only common factor across our MEM users is that they have multiple companies. And as the name implies, that's exactly what this product does. It allows you to handle multiple entities, departments, business units, divisions, whatever you want to call them, all within one single company of Business Central. You don't have to create a separate company for each one. And I know a lot of you might be saying, well, wait a minute, I have different user classes in my different groups. I don't want them seeing the information across the different companies. Rest assured, we have that taken care of. There's different security provisions that can be enabled for each company, so you only see what you're supposed to. The beauty, though, is once everything's all set up within one company, you can just use one single set of master file records to manage data across the entire enterprise, whether it's companies, vendors, customers, items, you name it. Once that's all in one database, you can do the do to, do from transactions within the same screen. We'll show you what that looks like. And of course, the reporting is much easier because it's all within one single company. For an example of that, let's just take a quick look at the visuals. So let that sink in for a second. What you're seeing right now is what the out-of-the-box structure is for Dynamics Business Central. If you have multiple companies, those are all represented by the little squares that are outlined in the green. So you've got company A, B, and C. Each of them, as you can see, it's a little bit of an alphabet soup. They have their own master file records there. So vendors for company A, vendors for company B, etc. They're all separate. They're all little silos, and it's very difficult to do the consolidated reporting. As you can see here, you have to create that fourth company, the business unit, to do consolidated reporting. So you've got two different systems here, and God forbid you needed to make a change to say your item master list. If you wanted to introduce a new item or a new set of 20 items, you have to do that for each individual company. So it's difficult to centrally maintain all of those business processes. So let's take a look instead at the architecture that we bring to the table with MEM. Looks a little bit cleaner, doesn't it? So as you can see now, with the green rectangle, there's only one company. This still represents all the different business units that we had before, but now there's just one master file list of all the vendors, customers, and items. Now, how we do that, as I alluded to earlier, and as you'll see momentarily, is with the MEM filtering and security up in orange there. So that's the brains of the operation. We're going to restrict or grant access as you tell it to as the system administrator, so people will see what they're supposed to. And then down below in the blue, we've got the other secret sauce, which is the MEM business logic. So that's where we can set up, define, and administer all the do-to-do-from transactions, things like the entity management or allocation templates, the reporting, that can all be done within our business logic. So it's a very transformational process, but it actually simplifies it. It makes it less complicated, easier to use, and it makes your frontline staff a lot more efficient. So that's what we're going to be showing today. Before I turn it over to Dawn, I just wanted to give you a few items here to run down to keep an eye out for in the demo. So we're going to be talking about how you can quickly and easily define the account substitution, because account substitution is really what powers everything that you'll see within MEM. It's important to understand that concept. And also on the setup side, the security options. Do you want it to be locked down tight as a drum? Or do you want it to be completely wide open, or somewhere in between? We'll show what those different parameters can look like, and you can decide what makes most sense for your organization. Of course, the big thing is the due to from transactions. So we'll show you, for example, what it looks like to do a centralized purchase from the head office, but on behalf of one of the field organizations. Even though someone else is paying for that, we'll show you how those transactions can flow through and balance out to the correct purchasing entity that owns the transaction. To make it a little bit more complicated, we've also got account allocation templates, and there we can define one single payables transaction. Maybe it's going to be split across 10, 20, 100 business units. It doesn't matter. It can be set up by percentage, and you can have multiple templates to apply for different types of things, whether it's a flat percentage that's allocated evenly across all of your locations, or maybe you want to base it on square footage or sales volume. Whatever that metric is, we'll give you the tools to create one that works for you. And then finally, to close it off, we'll talk about the reporting options that are available. So with that out of the way, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dawn. Dawn, I'll let you take over, and let's get into the demo.
All right, so I need to share my screen. Do I have someone to give that back to me?
Let me stop sharing.
Okay, and show my screen. So let me know when you see it.
It's perfect.
All
Yep.
right, let's make this full screen here for us, and away we go. So, folks, what we're looking at right here is a standard on-prem version of Business Central right now. Please understand that it doesn't matter if you're in the cloud, Azure, or here on-prem. It's going to function exactly the same way, so there's no concerns in that particular area. The other thing I want to point out at the very beginning, in this case, you're looking at a Cronus Canada up here in the top left. In a standard Business Central install, Cronus Canada would be the company. But once you install MEM and configure it, Cronus Canada doesn't do anything anymore. It simply becomes a data container, if you will, for all the companies that you've got in this particular environment. So the question logically would be, how do we handle that? How do we make different companies appear in this one Cronus Canada data container? Well, what we do is take the dimension capability of Business Central, and we utilize that to represent our companies. So let's start with that. But at this point in time, we're not looking at any MEM functionality. We're just looking at standard Business Central configuration dimensions, which are very, very common. If I click my dimensions here, you're going to open up and see that I've got a few created already. What we're going to do is take either Global Dimension 1 or Global Dimension 2 and make it represent my companies going forward. So I've called it company. So there it is over there. If I highlight that and take a look at the values under dimension and dimension values, what you're going to see here is a list of values. Each of these is a separate company. Now, one thing I want you to take away from this particular demo is that multi-entity management, MEM, for Business Central is very, very easy to configure, to set up, and to get up and running almost instantly. Not quite true, but very close to that. You notice I have companies 0 to 5. Let's say I want to add a new company. We'll call it, whoops, I got my number lock on here, company 6, and just for the sake of here, we'll just call it test. And tab off the line, I've just created company 600. That's it. I've added the value, the dimension value, and yes, I'm going to have to go back in and make sure I assign the users to it, maybe assign some vendors to it, but I don't have to create new vendors or customers. I don't have to create new users. I don't have to even create bank accounts or warehouses if I don't want to, if I don't need to. I can just assign what already exists to company 6, and I am instantly available and ready to go do transactions. And of course, maybe I've decided that, you know what, I don't know if I really need company 6, so let's go into company 6 here again. And let's just get rid of it. We'll delete this line. My point in showing you that is just simply, hey, it can be deleted. But you'll notice one of them said, do you want to delete this value? The next message says, hey, all your multi-entity management setup will disappear if you want to do that. So you want to be very sure you don't need that information maybe a week or 2 weeks down the road. But there's my information for my companies. We'll go click on company 0. I can now also go in, take a look at some details under actions and functions. And there's my multi-entity setup. If I click on that for company 0, what I'm going to get is a page that gives me my corporate information for this company. And obviously the same logic would apply for company 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. But now I've got a billing address, some shipping information. If I scroll all the way down, I even have a default bank account. That doesn't mean this is the only bank account that company 0 can have or share, but it does mean that by default, it will show up when I want to do cash receipts or when I want to pay some checks and so on and so forth. So I can put some company-specific information right in here, and away I go. And so far, that's basically BC functionality. So now, how is it that I can have these multiple companies, and yet I can keep them separate? I can control the activity for vendors and customers and so on and so forth. Let's back out of here, and let's go to my multi-entity setup. Now, in my environment, it's down here under, ironically, multi-entity management setup. We'll go to the highest level first. The first thing you're going to notice when this window pops up is that that global dimension I chose is highlighted here. And as you can see, as we already looked at it, it's called company, and away I go. Now that I've done that step, I can say, you know what, because I only have one set of master records for my customers and vendors and so on and so forth here, maybe I want to put some security on there so not every company can see every customer, every vendor, every bank account, and so on and so forth. In other words, maybe I want to lock it down as if they were a standalone company all by themselves. I can be that extreme. So I've got a few of them highlighted here, and we're going to show you that in a couple of windows. The rest of this is detailed information that we get into if you find this is of interest to you. But the bottom line is I picked my global dimension, and I'm locking down my master records now. So we're back out of here, go right back into change setup again, and we're going to look at a few setup windows, because with MEM being it's pervasive, it's every module, every transaction, you want to make sure you understand what it's doing when we actually take a look at a transaction. We'll pop down to user entity security. My users are going to be my Business Central users. I don't have to reinvent the wheel here. I don't have to have a separate layer of users. All I need to make sure of is that when I set them up, I get to dictate what companies they can see. Very important for most of our MEM users. If you don't need to separate users per company, fine. You just give them access to all companies. But you'll notice I've got company 0 to 5 here. The general manager can see company 2. The maritime manager can see company 2. Sales administrator, me, I can see everything but company 5. All right, and that's on purpose. So I've got all these companies configured, and now what I'm saying is, based on my user list, what companies can that user see when they sign into Business Central? And depending on the size of my organization, I could pivot table this and look at it from the entity perspective instead and see what users are assigned to that entity. So as you can see here, 2 users of number 1, and again, 2 users, number 0, 2 users with number 1. And of course, depending on where you go, it's going to vary from company to company to company. Nobody can see company 5. I've created it, it exists, it has corporate information, the dimension is set up, but nobody can use it because I've not assigned it to anybody. So now what have I done? Under the change setup, I've turned around and I've said, what segment, or pardon me, what dimension am I going to use? Global dimension 1. Now I've said, if all my existing BC users, what companies can each of them access? So now let's get to the company level. What am I going to do with my master records? Because I've only got one master record for vendors, one master record for customers, and so on and so forth. We're looking at the customer perspective here. Company 0 has access from the looks of it to every customer, but company 100 only sees a few. Company 200 sees a couple only, and so on and so forth. Do I have to restrict? No. Much like the BC users, you could give them access to every company should you so desire. But most of our clients have some restrictions. They have people that only work in 1 or 2 companies, but not in the rest. The same thing with our master records. If a particular company, for example, company 200, never uses this particular customer, why make it visible? It's just going to allow for human error, and transactions will eventually happen. Leave it off, they don't see it, they can't use it, no mistakes can be made. And we could pivot table this too, by the way. You notice direction is entity. I could pivot this from the master record file, bring all my customers over here to the left, and very quickly see each customer and what companies have access to their customer file and can do transactions for it. So you see what we're doing. Bit by bit by bit, we're locking down control and access to our separate companies as if they were in their own little world in your BC environment. Cronus Canada, Cronus Europe, Cronus USA, for example. In this case, they're not. They're all under Cronus Canada. Because they're all under Cronus Canada, Business Central is never going to think that do to, do froms are required, intercompany transactions. So we will create our own. You'll notice company 0 to company 100. There's all my do to, do froms that I've configured. In my case, being an accountant, I'm very specific with the account number for each relationship. You don't have to be that specific. You could have a couple of generic accounts and pump everything into that. But I've got them all set up here for each of my relationships, for each of my companies to the other. And if you've got a lot of companies, a lot of relationships, you could put them in a spreadsheet and import them here as long as your companies already exist and the account numbers themselves have already been configured within Business Central. So I could import, populate this table, and away I go. So now I picked the dimension to be my company. I've added access to the different master records to each of those companies. I've created my do to, do from so that I automatically will be in balance with any intercompany transactions. One other thing that can be possible because of the fact that we're in this one instance, if you will, is I can do this very easily. I can take, for example, an insurance bill, and I can allocate it across all my companies in a single transaction window. For example, if I add this allocation to a transaction, it's going to break up whatever the dollar amount is to these 4 companies at these percentages. Now, you might notice that I don't have this to 100%. I only have it to 70%. The reason I've done that is simply this. If you wanted to always have, for example, head office take the variable amount. Head office in my case is company 000. Notice it's not listed here. So if I have the invoice owned by company 000, it will pick up the 30%. If my invoice is owned for any of these other companies, they too will get that 30% plus they'll get the percentage allocated here. And we'll go look at that in just a minute, and it might make a little more sense to you. But understand that you can have as many of these allocation IDs as you like, which can greatly increase the efficiency of posting an invoice. You know, think of insurances or phone bills, or maybe even revenue allocation. You make a sale, it's supposed to go partly to sales, partly to implementation team, partly to professional services. Who knows? You can automatically allocate that upon posting the transaction itself. So again, we're still setting up MEM here. We got one more window to go look at. There are more, but in the sake of this webinar, I don't want to bore you with minor details of every single thing. We can also assign warehouses, locations, to companies as well. You notice head office here has the transfer warehouse, has the yellow warehouse, company 200 here has the blue warehouse only, and so on and so forth. So in this case, this company would actually own this warehouse, and I can restrict who gets to see it. I can restrict who gets to use it. And even if I give someone else permission to use my warehouse, do to, do froms will automatically be calculated if they put anything in it or take anything out of it. So that's the basic high level setup. There are some more windows we could look at, but of course, if you actually are serious about looking at the product, we could delve into that in more detail with each individual potential client. Let's now go look at some transactions. If I pop up a purchase invoice, we'll start there. And I'll just type purchase invoice. At this particular case, I've got a list of them here. I'm going to explain what MEM has added to the basic BC display windows or functionality as we go. So you notice the standard list format that BC likes to use. Notice over here on the left, there's my company code. So this document belonged to company 0. This document belonged to company 400. Now, because I have access to company 0 and company 400, I see both documents. If I was a user that did not have access to company 400, I would not see company 400. Any company 500 transactions that may have been created don't show up here because even though I'm the system administrator, I do not have access to company 500. So I wouldn't even know if these transactions existed. So let's open up this first one here, company 0. So this is Mundersan Corporation, one of the particular vendors that I have access to in here in company 0. If I open up my vendor list, you'll see that I've got all the vendors that I had checked off in my list of my setup screen. So they're all going to show up here. If one was not checked off, I would not see it in the drop-down list, just so you understand that. So now, you'll notice on the top of this document, this purchase invoice, I have company code 000. Because we're in a container, this Cronus Canada container, but we have multiple companies, we need some way to identify who actually owns this document. And that's how we do it. So company 0 is going to default here because it's my base home company. I can change this if I like to any company I have access to. And again, you notice no company 5, but I can change it to any of these other companies and it will ask me if I want to roll down the change to my body, and I could do that. You'll notice the allocation ID I talked about a few minutes ago. I could put that on the header, meaning every single line item down here in the body of this transaction would have this allocation template applied to it. Or if you notice on the body, I've got a company column here, and over a little bit towards the middle, I've got the allocation template. So theoretically, I could have a different allocation template on each line. But not only that, I could have a different company on each line as well. So this one transaction owned by company 0 could be shared amongst any company you've had access to, and the allocation templates could be different for every single line item. Now, we're not going to go into that detail because that's a little hard on the head to try to figure all the permutations and commutations that might apply there. But understand the capability is there for you to do that. Now, let's keep it very simple. Let's take this off. And I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to make this a different company. So now the document is owned by company 0. It's an insurance for what, 15,000, but company 1 is going to take the expense. So what's happening here? Company 0, which owns the document, is going to get the accounts payable. They're going to be liable to pay this $15,000. Now, somebody else might pay it, but it'll go on their aging, on their AP, on their balance sheet. But company 100 is taking the benefit of the $15,000 insurance policy. They're going to get the expense. So how that looks is something like this in an accounting perspective now. When I populate this and take a look at what my GL entry is going to look like, because I've got two companies involved, when I open this up, you'll see company 100 is getting the expense. Then I've got a due to and due from in relationship to company 0, which gets the AP. So everything is balanced now, because even though I get the benefit, I owe you because you're going to pay the bill. All right, and away we go. So we're back out of that. Now let's say, you know what, I did want to put an allocation account against this. So let's go back in here and let's add this insurance allocation. We'll pop out of there. Now I'm going to put this back to 000 so we don't overcomplicate it. So I'm back to company 0 that owns the document, company 0 that's owning this expense line. So theoretically, without an allocation, there would not be a due to from process. But I've got that allocation. Remember, company 1, 2, 3, and 4 were taking 70%. So now let's go look at what's going to happen in the background. So understand while this screen is populating, you don't ever have to come in here and pay attention to this. This is just so you can understand what is happening in the background with multi-entity and Business Central working together. So you notice company 4, their portion, company 3, their portion, company 2, their portion, company 1, their portion. All of these have due to and froms between them, but company 0 is picking up that 30% I told you about. No due to the froms because they relate to company 0. So there isn't any due to the froms in that particular piece. The full 15,000 is allocated. The due to the froms are automatically calculated and recorded here for your use, for your reference. No problem whatsoever, and away you go. Perfectly balanced transaction. And again, you could have made this, or I could have made this a whole lot more complicated by having several lines to different companies, different allocation templates, and you can just imagine the due to the froms. What's sweet about that is you don't have to worry about it. It's automatically done constantly by Business Central and multi-entity management working together. Now, just as a very quick point of interest, if I back out of here, yes, we'll just exit here, and I go all the way back to my main screen, I'm going to bring up a sales invoice, not to go and show you much of anything other than that it looks the same. Let's do that. I have a sales invoice here. When I bring the sales invoice up, the sales invoice, there's my list, exactly the same as the purchase side of things. I just simply get my company coding on the left here. I open up one of these documents, it doesn't matter which one I open up, and I get company 100. If I take a look at my customers available to company 100, you notice, by the way, the list is very short. It's only those customers that we looked at in the setup and configuration of multi-entity that I gave access to for company 100. Nothing else shows up here. Again, keep in mind that I am the administrator, and yet I can do nothing about it whatsoever. I can't go into that company unless I want to go back into the setup, give myself access to that customer for that company, then I could come in here and I could take a look at it. Okay? The other thing I want you to notice is that if I do pick a warehouse here, I need to have access to the warehouse first of all. Now, we're not going to go into this in detail because of the timelines, but I have yellow warehouse, I have blue warehouse, I have in and out transaction warehouses, but you notice I've only got access as a user of company 100 to these two warehouses right here. There's nothing else I can access. There's nothing else I can see. So you get the idea, hopefully, that doesn't matter what document you're looking at, you're going to be restricted by however you've configured the security aspect of multi-entity management as to what warehouses you can access, what customers, what vendors you can access, and so on and so forth. And that would even apply to bank accounts that were on that list as well. I can own bank accounts, but I can also share them or not with other companies that are in my MEM install. Let's go pay a bill. If I pop up here, just to give you some idea of the additional functionality that's here, we'll go to a payment journal, and let's bring the payment journal up. So when I pop up the payment journal, you'll notice very familiar, this will become quite quickly, company 0 in the header. My allocation template's right there. Down on the body, I've got my company column over here, and somewhere over here in the middle, I will have an allocation template capability if I need to add allocation templates. Now, a couple of things I want to show you here. Already, hopefully you're getting the idea that, look, every single transaction window is going to identify both who owns the document and who's taking part in the transaction of that document. That's a given. Anywhere MEM is installed in BC, you're going to get that relationship. The company code on the header, company columns down here where you can add different companies, different transactions if you've got access. But let's take a look here at this. Let me eliminate this for a second. I'm going to select more, and I'm going to highlight it all. And just for the sake of showing you this functionality, I'm going to delete this particular payment batch. Don't want to cut the checks. An option that's a little bit different here, that's not in the other windows, you'll notice I have a decentralized tab here, and it's not activated, which means that the opposite's going to happen. This batch is going to be centralized. And what does that mean exactly? It means that the default bank account for company 0 is going to be picked to pay all these bills. And let's actually see that happen. Let's suggest some vendor payments here. It's going to come up and give me some default lists. Just for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to put in a document number, we'll call it number 1 here, and hit OK. All I'm doing is I'm selecting a few vouchers for payment, and I've created some vendor payment lines for all currencies. That's great. And it's going to populate the field here in just a second, and then this account will disappear. So what I've done now, you'll notice over on the far left, I've got company 200, company 100, company 0, company 400, i.e. any company that I have access to, it would populate here. Once again, you'll notice there is no company 500 because I don't have access to it. But the key here is, because I said centralized, in my bank setup or in my company setup, in that dimension file I was showing you a little while ago, I had dictated that the WWB operating bank account would be the default bank account for company 0. So you notice that's the bank account that's going to pay the bills for these vouchers from all these different companies. And as you already saw in a purchase invoice document, back end of this, all the appropriate intercompany transactions will automatically be calculated and balanced out by multi-entity. You don't have to think about it. So I scroll all the way back here now. Let's make one more little change. Let's go and select everything again. We'll select more, and let's delete this batch. So I'll manage this, go in, we'll delete this batch. So let's change that little tab now to decentralized. Let's activate it, in other words. So now I've said, let's decentralize this batch. And let's do exactly the same thing we just did a couple minutes ago. So we're going to pop back in here. We'll put our document number as 1 again, so we have something to start with, and open it up. So now it's going to do exactly the same thing, but now it might come back and say, you know what? Oh, and there it is. You don't have permission for this particular account number. Well, that's great. Okay. I didn't give myself access to it, so be it. I'll just delete that. So now what have we got? Company 2, Company 0, Company 1. Again, a variety of vouchers from different companies. But notice, because I've picked decentralized, notice the bank accounts. WW dollar, which is the default bank for Company 200. There's operating again for Company 0. Down here for Company 100, there's the NBL bank, and so on and so forth. So now in a single batch, I'm able to create payment vouchers or payment information for all these vouchers from different entities and pick their particular bank accounts to process this. So depending on how you're actually processing this, whether it be actually printing hard checks, blank check stock, or whatever it might be doing, you might have some different variances to how you have to handle this. But understand, I could come in here in just a single batch, do a decentralized processing, and pay all the bills that I have access to and that I need to pay. So very, very powerful tool there for use with multi-entity management that could save you a lot of time and effort if you wanted to use either centralized or decentralized processing. I'm just going to delete this and get out of here. And once that populates out, so we've talked about the purchasing side of it. What if we want to do a cash receipt or a deposit or a reconciliation? Let's just type cash receipt to start with. Again, we're not going to go into every piece of functionality. What I particularly wanted to show you here, I must have typed faster than my machine was ready to think. So we'll go to cash receipt journals. And all I want to do is show you here how it's fully integrated with all the different modules that you might want to be working with, that you can get used to very quickly, the MEM installation and configuration. As a matter of fact, I will tell you that a lot of folks who weren't familiar with BC will walk into the product. If you have MEM already installed, they'll think it's standard BC because there's not a lot of change in the way you look at the different windows and screens that you're going to see. Again, there's my company code here. There's my allocation template there. There's my company column. And somewhere over here, oh, there it is right there, my MEM allocation template ID. So hopefully you can understand that as long as MEM is installed for that module, and MEM, by the way, is a modular product, so you can have just the basic core AR, AP, and GL transactions, or you might have inventory. As a matter of fact, let's pop back out here and give you just a flavor for how inventory might work. If I type in here and I say, let's say item, let's say reclass. Now today, what we have working in our reclass or in our inventory module is the basic inventory functionality, putting product in and out of warehouses, calculating the due to do froms if I take a product from a warehouse that doesn't belong to me, or I put a product in, and so on and so forth. But we could also transfer. So you notice once again, I have my company code here. Now item reclass is basically an adjustment to where something is or where it's supposed to be located. So here I've got a posting date, a document number, I got a bicycle here, and you notice I'm putting it in warehouse blue from yellow. So just so you know, yellow belongs to company 0. Blue belongs to company 200. You'll notice over here in the far left, my company code is grayed out. Why is that? Because now it's the warehouse that's taking control. It's the warehouse that's going to dictate what happens. Do I need due to do froms? And the answer here would be yes, because you notice blue belongs to company 200. So if I was to fulfill this transfer, it would move the product from yellow to blue warehouse, whether it be virtually or an actual physical move that you have to go make. But the most important thing to keep in mind is there would be a net due to do from for the cost of that particular piece of inventory to be relieved from company zero's warehouse and installed in company 200's warehouse, which is blue. So automatically it happens. Again, you don't have to think about the due to froms. You don't have to worry about them whatsoever. You just simply go ahead and that's it. And just to give you a little flavor, I'm right now about 10 minutes before the end. I think we're going to be fine on time. If I look at a physical inventory journal, I think I can bring this up here. Let's just see if I can do that. And there's my physical inventory journal. And again, to show you that the functionality is there and it should be very, very familiar to you as we go through this. You notice company zero, company code's over here, and I can turn around now and I could prepare a warehouse count for all my companies, or I could be very specific and I could dictate who I want to prepare it for. Let's just take a look at this first of all and see what I'm going to get here. So right now I've got my posting date, my document number, what I want to do as far as what items I want to count, and I can filter this by location number, by warehouse entry, or I could simply say, you know what, let's do them all at once. But typically you would do one at a time or maybe a couple at a time, depending on who has the warehouse. Produce this, put my count in, and away I go. Let me just produce it, at least so you can see what it would look like and get a feel for it. It's going to process through here, and hopefully it'll come up and give me a report in just a couple of minutes, or hopefully less than a couple of minutes. And we can take a look at how all the companies, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here so we see it full screen. All my companies for all the items are listed here. What warehouse was this item in? What company did it belong to? So there it all is. I can certainly just come around here now, and I can actually go ahead and I can start changing my count for each of these particular companies all at once. So if I wanted to, I could have 5 or 6 warehouses belonging to 5 or 6 companies, and I could actually come into this physical inventory journal and I could make my adjustments to all items for all companies. I don't have to worry so much about the company code over here. There's not going to be due to the froms because I'm adjusting within a particular line item, and away I go. And I can make my adjustments. So I could print off or go ahead and calculate for company 0, for company 100, for company 200, and company 300. Not a problem. I could also do groupings, company 0 and 1, company 2 and 3, company 4 and 5, or whatever the case might be. So, but as you can see, I can simply populate all of this and away I go. Now, to get into some of the warehousing functionality, I will tell you right off the top, that module is not completed as far as warehousing. Inventory functionality certainly is. But we could even do a physical inventory order and have each document go to a specific person in each warehouse for that company, and they could do the counts, populate it back in, we import it back in together, and in one fell swoop, we could have a reconciliation from a physical inventory count for all companies at one particular time. So I'll leave it at that particular aspect for that. I should let you know that we have just released the fixed assets module as well. And at the end of May, early June, we will have the jobs module out as well for Business Central and multi-entity management. So I apologize, I can't show you that today. It has just been released, so I now have to get into my demo environment as far as fixed assets, and we're just a couple of months away from having the job module, or maybe 3 months away from having the jobs module available to us. So the next question might be, what about my reporting? How can I handle that? Well, let's take a look at a few of the basic reports and see what they look like. Now, a couple of things to note here. When I type in just plain multi-entity management, it's going to give me a little reports and analysis button at the bottom. And you notice in my environment today, there are 50 odd reports built in. About 2 months ago, there was 30. Now there's 50, and I think we're much beyond that again. So every time I update my demo environment, I have more actual reports to look at. So understand this is the reporting you can utilize now with multi-entity being installed, in Business Central. So you wouldn't be using the standard pre-built Business Central reports because they don't have the security layer, so we will disable those. But we give you all of these. Now, these are SQL Server style reports, meaning that you can build your own. You can have as many of these as you like, and reporting tools that are outside of Business Central that I can't demo for you, like Solver, Jet Reports, all have been known and do work with multi-entity management as well. So you can still feel comfortable if you're using those mainstream reporting tools that are outside the ERP. You can be comfortable they will respect the security and the setup and configuration of multi-entity as well. But let's look at what we have for you within the system. Let's take a look at an income statement. Now, I'm going to say, as you notice, standard filters that come with BC, except here's my company filter. If I take a look at what's available in my company filters, I could choose company 0 and 1. I could choose 0, 1, and 4. I could use 4, 3, and 1, or whatever combination I want. It doesn't matter. I'm going to leave it so that no company is left out. Now, I can send this to a PDF. I can send this to an Excel spreadsheet. I can send this to a Word document. I can send this report to a scheduler and run it on a regular basis with these default settings. Or I could just preview it from here. This is going to give me, though, a one-page, very simple, very basic, consolidated income statement for all my companies. When it pops up, you'll see it's page 1 of 1, very, very standard, but this is a consolidated. You notice way up here, dimension 1 filter, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, I do not have access to company 5, so it doesn't show up in my reports. But there's a very basic. Now, in these particular top few reports, and we'll go back into MEM here to give you the details. Bear with me a second. So I pop up MEM, again, go down to my reporting function, and we'll show all 50 again. So my point in showing you this is you can get the very basic consolidated. So these up top are very basic consolidated. But as I start to scroll down, you'll notice I start to get balance sheet by entity. So if I was to look at that particular report, or income statement by entity, if you will, if I just pop this one up, because we have balance sheet, same logic either way. Now I'll do the same thing. I'll back off the filter, which would just have given me company 000, and let's preview this report. Now, when this report pops up, I'm not going to get a one-pager anymore because I'm doing this by entity. So I've got 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I've got 5 entities. I've got 5 pages. So there is company 0 head office. There is company 100, company 200, company 300, company 400, and that's it, where it ends. I don't have company 500 again because I don't have access. But you get the idea. So now I've got not just a consolidated, but I've got the ability to print off a report per company or per entity, whatever it is that you want to call it. And just to give you a feel for the type of reports we've already pre-designed, we'll look at a couple more. So when I scroll down here, you notice I can start to get into things like, oh, well, there's this vendor file by entity for 1099s, aged accounts payable by entity. If I take a look at that, pop it up. And again, we'll get rid of the filter. Don't want to filter that just to 1, and we just go ahead and report this. Now, when I bring this particular report up, what I want you to notice is that I've got, again, the 5-page report. So I've got company 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 here again, but there, I'm going to make this a bit bigger so we can see it. I don't know about you, but I have a hard time seeing the small print. So there is my company code up here, the 5 companies I've got access to. There's company 0 on 1 page for my payables. I can scroll down through company 2, 100 East, pardon me, company 100 East Coast Commercial, and the same logic as I showed you a few minutes ago. It's going to walk through. Now, here's what I want you to notice. If I go to company 5, I've got Progressive Home Furnishings for company 400. I scroll back, I've got the same Progressive Home Furnishings again for company 300. If I scroll back, I get Progressive Home Furnishings for company 200, and so on, and so on, and so on. So why am I telling you that? Because that particular vendor is a single vendor setup in my BC with MEM configuration. I don't have it created 5 times. Multi-entity is going in every single time you do a transaction, and it's separating out the data based on the ownership of the transaction that you're posting. Now, you have to think about that to get your head around. That's great, but understand that MEM will do it automatically all the time. So I don't need to have 5 Progressive Home Furnishings for my 5 entities. 1 master record file is fine. MEM will keep all the data segregated for you as you so desire. One final report we'll take a look at. Pop that back up in here. Go into MEM one more time. And when that report list pops up, we'll open up all the 50 again. This time I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom. And what I want to show you here is just a generic report, a MEM trial balance, but spread global dimension. Now, when I pick that up, one thing I want to point out to you here is I've got this little button here that says print to Excel. The reason it says that is this particular report, let's say I had 30 companies and I installed multi-entity and I put all these 30 companies in this one little instance. And now I want to do a spread global, meaning column by column for each company. Can you imagine how small the print would have to be to get that even on a legal size landscape. So we've got the option of just simply saying, you know what, go right to Excel and I'll take a look at it in Excel. But we've only got the 5 companies, so we're going to preview this the way it is. So what am I going to get here is a single report again, but in this particular case, it's going to have all the other companies represented along with, let's make this a bit bigger, along with a totals column here in the inside. Now, what I want to verify here for you is this. Again, I'm the system administrator. We have a company 500. It's got transactions, but I don't see it. And not only that, just so you know, it doesn't add up here to the totals column either. The dollars and cents from company 500, as far as I'm concerned as a user, do not exist. If I was to go remove company 400, this 96.95 would disappear from the total, and this would become roughly 162 negative thousand. Always accurate based on what I have access to. And since these are SQL Server, you can always know that you can dump them out to Excel. You can build other reports of your own. And I believe in the fall, in the October release of Business Central, we're going to have a product called Smart List Designer, which allows you to go in and build your own ad hoc reports over and above the 50 or 60 or 70 or 100, whatever it's going to end up being, that we give you. So going back to my home page, let me summarize in just a couple of minutes. We've picked a global dimension to be our company. We've now given those global dimensions some information, company address, company details, the bank account. We've turned around now and taken users that we have that are standard Business Central users, and we've assigned them to some or all or none of the companies. We've turned around and said, look, we're only going to have one master file for vendors, one master file for customers, but we're going to filter and control which companies can see those master records. And we've added our own do-to-do-froms for MEM itself. We've even given you some allocation IDs, the ability to lock down inventory warehouses from site to site, from company to company. And that's all can be configured in a very, very short period of time, as long as you fully understand what it is you want to do with MEM and where you want to go as far as the configuration and the security is concerned. So that's a high level, folks. We've taken up roughly, we got 10 minutes left if there were questions, but I'll hand it back now to the moderators and we can go from there.
Thank you, Don. Let me just share the screen again. Appreciate you preemptively doing some Q&A there based on the commonly asked questions. That was great. So I hope everyone appreciated the demo that Don just provided. Very good overview, but obviously kind of generic because it's different for each individual customer. What I would like as an action item is, if you're watching this at some future date and you think that MEM might have some relevance for your company, please let us know. You can either reach out to whoever you work with at the TM group or reach out to me. Here's my contact info, brian@binarystream.com. I'll just go on to the next slide and you can have it there. What we'd like to do is to set up a discovery call, talk to you about your specific requirements and how they differ from some of the scenarios that we presented today. I'm sure that there's going to be some similarities, but also some important differences. Maybe you use different modules or have a different type of account structure. We can handle a lot of different scenarios and in different verticals. So please let us know. We'll set that up for you, and we would love to talk to you about your requirements. That concludes today's webinar. Thanks very much for participating, and we will talk to you in the future. Thanks, everyone.